Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of history's most absolutely radical transformation stories. How a man who dedicated his life to destroying a movement became its greatest champion, and in doing so, changed the world forever. So, to get us started, let me ask you a kind of simple question.
Yeah, that's right. You need a mold. In Korean, they call it a tul. Without that pattern, you've just got batter, right? You don't have that specific, recognizable shape.
And it turns out it's kind of the same with us. In life, we also need some kind of pattern, a model, that gives shape and meaning to who we are, what we say, and what we do.
Now check this out. One of the most influential figures in all of history, the Apostle Paul, he does something pretty audacious. He stands up and says, "Follow my example." But he immediately qualifies it by saying it's only because he himself is following the ultimate pattern, Jesus Christ.
But here's the thing about Paul. He wasn't always a role model, not even close. In fact, his story starts from a place of just intense, violent opposition to the very faith he would later champion.
So before he was Paul, he was Saul of Tarsus. And this guy, he was the definition of an upstanding citizen. He was a brilliant student of a famous teacher named Gamaliel, a devout member of the Pharisees, and he was absolutely zealous about his faith. For Saul, being right with God was something you earned through sheer effort and perfect obedience to the law.
And all that zeal, all that passion, it led him to see the first followers of Jesus as a dangerous threat, a cancer that needed to be cut out. So he made it his personal mission to destroy the early church.
And we're not talking about some passive disagreement here. No way. This guy was on the front lines. He was there giving his approval when Stephen, the first Christian martyr, was stoned to death. He led raids on homes, dragging people to prison. He was even on his way to another city, Damascus, with official papers to hunt down even more believers.
But on that road to Damascus, something happened. Something that didn't just change his mind, it completely shattered his entire worldview, his mission, his whole understanding of God.
In a flash of light so bright it knocked him to the ground, Saul, the hunter, came face to face with the resurrected Jesus, the very man whose followers he was trying to wipe off the map. This was it, the ultimate confrontation.
And this moment, right here, is the pivot on which his entire life turns. Think about it. Saul, who lived by a code of strict justice, fully expected condemnation. He absolutely deserved it. But instead of punishment, he was met with forgiveness. Instead of condemnation, he was given a new mission. This encounter just broke his whole framework for how God works. He realized acceptance isn't earned by being perfect. It's a gift, an act of pure grace.
You know, this incredible act of grace did so much more than just change his name from Saul to Paul. It completely reforged his identity from the ground up and gave him this unstoppable new purpose.
You see, Paul never, ever forgot that moment. The fact that he, a man who had approved of murder and hunted God's people, was shown this unbelievable mercy, well, that memory of being forgiven became the relentless engine for the rest of his life. He felt compelled to tell the whole world about the grace that had saved him.
And that new mission was anything but easy. Just look at this list. He was thrown in prison over and over, beaten with rods, stoned, and literally left for dead, shipwrecked. It's an unbelievable amount of suffering. And he faced it all for the very faith he once tried to destroy, because the grace he'd been shown felt infinitely more real than any pain he could endure.
This quote just nails his new mindset perfectly. His own life, something he used to protect so fiercely with righteous works, he now considered it basically worthless compared to his new task, telling everyone about the good news of God's grace, the very grace that had turned his life upside down.
So, here's the crucial point. Paul's own dramatic life story became the ultimate proof of his central message. His experience wasn't just some interesting anecdote. It was his entire theological argument.
His whole mission really revolved around this one huge question. How can a person be made right with God? His old life was his attempt to answer that question with perfect behavior. His new life, well, it revealed the completely different answer.
His argument, built from his own experience, was actually really simple and powerful. He basically said, look, if a guy like me, Saul of Tarsus, a murderer, an enemy of God, if I can be made right with God, then there is no way it was because of my own good deeds. It had to be a totally free gift, received simply by having faith in what Jesus did.
His own life was Exhibit A in the case for grace.
And of course, a story this powerful doesn't just end with one person. Paul's story became that very model, that mold we talked about at the beginning, for countless others all throughout history.
The source material points out how this pattern of a life radically changed by grace just keeps repeating. You see it in figures like missionary Robert Jermaine Thomas, who was martyred while trying to bring the Bible to Korea. You see it in the Korean Christians who gave their lives rather than renounce their faith. The legacy just continues.
What all of their lives show us is what it actually looks like to follow the pattern of Jesus. It means trusting God in the most difficult, impossible situations. It means always framing your choices by asking, what would Jesus do? They chose to follow that pattern no matter what it cost them.
And that brings us full circle, right back to our pastry mold. Saul began his life trying to shape himself into a pattern of his own making, through sheer willpower. Paul ended his life having been completely reshaped by a totally different pattern, a pattern of grace. And his radical story really forces us to ask ourselves, what mold is shaping my life? Thanks for watching.